Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome back to Mr. Mahmoud Helmi channel. Today, inshallah, we will have and discuss the final revision for the story A Tale of Two Cities for grade 9. I have divided my revision into three sections. The first section includes the first and second and third chapter, and the second section includes chapter 4, 5, and 6. The third includes chapters 7, 8, and 9. Here are the most important questions that are expected in the final exam. Let's start. These questions are mostly repeated in the exams for the 3 or 5 years before. The first question, speak about the big gap between the high and the low classes in the two countries. There were huge differences and gaps between people at that time. The nobles were living in comfort and luxury, whereas the peasants and common people were living in poverty and misery. The people were living in comfort and luxury, whereas the peasants and common people were living in poverty and misery. Question number 2, why were the poor in very bad conditions in France and England? Here you have to mention the bad conditions that the people were having at that time in England and in France. The King of England was too busy with problems with American colonies to worry about his own people who lived in poverty. The King of France and his noblemen were more concerned with their pleasure and wealth to worry about the poor, hungry, lower classes. We have a different kind of questions that is a quotation from the story, and you have to comment. When you have a question like this, you have to say who said that, to whom, and your comment about that quotation. Recalled to life. This is one of the most repeated quotation or question that you may find in the final exam. Recalled to life. That was Mr. Lorry's reply to the bank's message. It meant that Dr. Manet, who was believed to be dead for so long, was found alive. He would be recalled to life by the help of Miss Lorry and Lucy Manet. Question number 4. Wait at Dover for Mademoiselle. Comment. This was the message the horse rider carried for Mr. Lorry. The message asked Mr. Lorry to wait at Dover for Miss Manet to accompany her to Paris, as she was afraid to travel alone, so as to see and take her father back to England. What strange dream did Mr. Lorry have? What did it mean? As you know that Mr. Lorry, while he was in the carriage, he had a nap, and while he was sleeping, he had that terrible dream. He dreamed that he was digging a man out of a grave and asking him how long he had been buried. The man answered that he was buried for almost 18 years. This was a reflection of Mr. Manet, Mr. Lorry's mission of recalling Dr. Manet to life after his long imprisonment. Next, why couldn't you tell her what you had to without frightening her to death? Comment. Of course, this is quotation from chapter 2, okay, and it was said by Miss Pross, Okay, Miss Pross, the woman who had taken care of Lucy since childhood, said this to Mr. Lorry. Miss Pross attacked Mr. Lorry violently and shouted those words at him when Lucy had fainted after knowing the truth from him. Describe the conditions of people in Saint Antoine, giving example of their misery. This is a very important question. Describe the conditions of people in Saint Antoine, giving example of their misery. If you want to give an example about the misery of people of that time, the cask wine is the most important one. Saint-Antoine in Paris was a poor place where poor people lived in hunger, poverty, sickness, and misery. The streets were dirty. People lived there like animals. The scene of the wine cask shows how far people were poor and suffering. They gathered down to drink a mixture of mud and wine when the cask broke. Next, what happened when the wine cask dropped from the cart? The wine spilled on the rough stones in the street. All the people stopped what they were doing and ran over to drink the wine that was mixed with the mud. And if you want to add more, the mothers were squeezing a piece of clothes in their that filled in with mud in their children's mouths. The wine stains left the streets looking blood-stained. Discuss. The scene of the wine cask is a symbol from Charles Dickens on the miserable life in France at the time. The scene has a double meaning. First, it shows how poor the life of the lower classes in France was. Next, it also predicts the real blood that would stain the streets of France during the Revolution. And he is in the same exact state he was in when his friends asked if I would risk taking him in and not breathe a word about the matter to anyone. Comment. Ernest Devanche said this to Mr. Lorry when the latter asked if Dr. Manette was alone in the room when they went to see Dr. Manette. Mr. Lorry was asking Monsieur Devanche if he was alone in the room. Monsieur Devanche explained that the man was in the same state he was in when he left the prison, and Devanche risked taking him to his house because if anyone had released anyone from the prison at that time, he will be in a very big danger and he may be put in the prison like him. 105 North Tower comment. Also, this is one of the most common quotations that is repeated in the exams. 105 North Tower comment. That was Dr. Manette's answer when Devanche asked him about his name. That was the number of his solitary cell in which he had been imprisoned 14 years. This was the name he got used to hearing for 18 years, that he forgot his own name. Next. That night long ago, when I was called out of the house, she had laid her head on my shoulder. She was afraid for me to go. Comment. Dr. Manette said this when to his wife. Of course, he said this to his wife. This was when he saw Lucy. She reminded him of her mother and the night he was taken away to prison. She was sitting with him, lying her head on his shoulder when he was called out or when he was taken to prison. Lucy's golden hair made Dr. Manette remember a detailed scene that had happened 18 years earlier. What is the significance of that? Dr. Manette had kept a few strands of his wife's golden hair. When he saw that Lucy had the same hair, his memory was refreshed and remembered the moment he was taken out of his house to the prison 18 years earlier. This showed that the man's memory wasn't completely lost, and there was a good possibility for him to lead a normal life once more. It is the same. How can it be? When was it? Comment. Of course, these words were said by Dr. Manette. Dr. Manette said this when he saw Lucy had the same hair of his late wife. He didn't know about her birth. He wanted to know of the birth of his daughter because she was born after he had gone to prison. He wanted to know how and when that happened. What effect had prison left on Dr. Manette? This is a very important question. Dr. Manette was greatly affected. He became a wreck of a man. A wreck of a man, that means that the remains of a man. He suffered the loss of mind, the weakness in body. He became frightened, shaking, and uncertain of anything. He could remember nothing of his past life, even his name. He forgot his name. What did Gaspard do when he saw the wine cask drop from the cart and the red wine flew on the ground, and why? He dipped his fingers in the muddy wine and wrote the word blood on the wall because he believed the revolution would break out and the blood would flow like wine in the streets. And we see that Monsieur Devarge prevented him to complete writing on the wall because this could be very dangerous for him and for Monsieur Devarge. You are not the jailer's daughter. Comment. Okay. Dr. Manette was confused when he saw a young lady in his prison cell. He thought he was still in prison and he wondered what brought that young lady there. But when he saw the young lady had the same strands of golden hair of his late wife, his weak memory was refreshed. Okay? I think these are the most important questions. That doesn't mean that you neglect the other questions. You have to study all the questions in the chapter 1, 2, and 3, but these are the mostly repeated questions in the exams. So you have to give them more care and till we meet again in the second series of this revision, okay, that will include chapter 4, 5, and 6. Till we meet again, I wish you the best of luck. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so as to get everything new that I will send to you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mahmoud Helmi.